Welcome to the Principles of Performance podcast, where we discuss how to optimize your health, fitness, and performance. Drawing on decades of experience of working as coaches, consultants, and trainers to top performers, athletes, and teens from professional sports to top universities to the U.S. military, Eric DeGatti and Mike Perry discuss topics and strategies of how to perform at your highest level and be your very best. Join us and our friends and colleagues who are leaders in the fitness and performance industry as we investigate and challenge the most popular training, nutrition, lifestyle, and recovery protocols. And away we go. Here we are with episode number 51 of the Principles of Performance podcast. I am your host, Eric DeGatti, along with my friend and co-host, Mike Perry. And Mike, I am giving you full credit for this episode, good or bad, because you have turned me on to this guy's work, Mr. Devan McConnell, and you coordinated the whole thing. So I'll let you kind of kick this thing off.
I actually didn't coordinate anything. You actually took care of it. I just know Devan because, Devan's a friend of mine. When he was at Lowell, I don't want to steal your thunder with the bio here, but when he was working 10 minutes from the gym, he was my talk shop beer drinking buddy, where we'd talk shop and drink a beer. And, that's what we did. And we were able to get together quite a bit, and we've known each other for quite some time. And look, he's one of the best in the industry, man. He's not only does he understand the in-depth stuff, but he can make it digestible for the people like myself that don't understand the big words. So we're fortunate to have this guy on the podcast today, but I'll let you go ahead and finish up with the official bio because I don't want to steal anyone's thunder.
Well, you certainly have no shortage of drinking buddies, do you, Perry?
Well, it's one of those things, right? You just, he's really good at it. So am I. So we figured we'd team up,
Talent sees talent.
That's it.
So the official bio on Devan, he's the high performance director for the Arizona Coyotes in the NHL, and he was previously down here with me in New Jersey with the Devils, where he's the director of performance and science and reconditioning. And prior to his time here in Jersey, he was, as you said, the head of hockey performance and sports science at University of Massachusetts Lowell. He's also previously served as a sports performance coordinator out at Stanford with Smart Kids from 2008 to 2011, where we worked closely with women's basketball as well as men's and women's volleyball programs. And during his time at Stanford, the women's basketball competed in 3 consecutive Final Fours, while the women's volleyball team competed in 2 Final Fours, and men's volleyball won the 2010 NCAA Championship. Once Mike turned me on to Devan, I immediately grabbed his book here, Intent, which I have right here, where he co-authored with Justin Roethlingshofer. I hope I said that right. And it's an awesome book. So we're really excited to talk to him. Devan, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me on, guys. I appreciate it. Looking forward to it.
Absolutely. So, Mike, I don't remember if you have the first question or do I here. Let me check.
I have it.
Perfect.
All right. Are we ready to go or what? Or do you need to get organized, DeGatti? Let's go.
No, we're all good. This is your show. This is all your thing here.
All right. Well, so this is kind of funny because, I know the answers, but I'm just going to, for our guests, for, all of our millions of listeners, they want to hear the story. So Devan, you've been working in pro hockey for years. How much of your own career as a player helped you with becoming the coach that you are now? And then we're going to have a follow-up to
that. Sounds good. I think the idea of you always get this question, is it beneficial or is it necessary to play the sport that, potentially you work in? And to me, the answer is it's yes and no. I know a lot of good practitioners in, I work in ice hockey primarily at this point. I know practitioners that have never played ice hockey that are unbelievable performance coaches in ice hockey. And at the same time, there's a lot of guys that, vice versa. I played the game. I was a goaltender. I played at the college level. I think it's helpful from the standpoint of understanding the culture of the sport, understanding some of the nuances. Again, those aren't things that can't be learned, but it's probably helpful to have an idea, having grown up in the game. understand some of the, like I said, the nuances of, like the skating stride, and is very different, has some similarities and differences from, land-based sprinting. So it's important to kind of understand those things. What goaltenders do, as an example, in ice hockey is very unique. So having been a goaltender, I think there's some benefit there. But again, I think it can kind of go either way. Those are things that are learnable. But it always helps to be able to speak the language with the players, be able to speak the language with the coaches. So yeah, as a net positive, I think there's benefit to have played the game.
Absolutely. So let me ask you this. So how much, and you don't have to put a number on it really, but so how much do you feel that playing the sport in the past has impacted your ability to be a performance coach? And now I know there's several different components of this, but do you feel like, playing the game and competing, do you feel like, one, that has truly allowed you to really get the feel of the demands of what the sport does on the body, but do you also think maybe it provides a bit more credibility when you are working with pros because they know that you've been on the ice and you've played the game?
Yeah, I mean, there is a layer to that. I think, again, it's a nuanced question and answer, because once the athletes trust you, then it doesn't matter if you've played the game or not. I think it can be helpful day one to getting trust and buy-in from players at this level. But one of the things I find with professional athletes is, at the end of the day, they want help performing at the highest level. And whether or not you played the game, if you can demonstrate your ability to help them, achieve those types of goals. But yeah, like, again, I think it does matter. There was when I worked in New Jersey, I was kind of the took that role, and was kind of obviously like low man on the totem pole, new guy in the room, just starting to get to know guys. And I probably was able to grab a little bit of credibility and build some trust quickly, just because I ended up practicing with the team a couple of times when we had a goalie that was out sick and they needed somebody to shoot pucks at. And the guys all of a sudden went from, not knowing who I was, who's a sports science guy in the corner in the weight room, to all of a sudden like, oh, like, you actually can play the game and I can shoot pucks off your head. Like, oh, okay, I'll listen to you a little more. So I think there's a layer of that for sure that can build some early credibility. But again, at the end of the day, like, if I wasn't good at what I did, but I played the game, they could sniff that out too. So, both parts are certainly important.
So when you get to
that,
I'm sorry, go ahead,
sorry,
Mike.
bud. I was just going to say, all I can think of is like you in the in that sort of, put you into the position that Adam Sandler was in, where you're like, you're in the batting cage and you're like, 6 more weeks till hockey season, got to toughen up. That's pretty much what you did, but these guys were ripping slap shots at you. So, hey, props to you for getting in there, because people don't realize what 100-mile-an-hour shot or catch or something feels like in general when it's coming at you. People don't realize what 60 miles an hour feels like, never mind 100 miles an hour. And props to you for getting in there and taking those licks, because I'm sure you felt it the next day, regardless of all the padding.
Yeah, it's actually terrifying. I have no interest in going back out there with these guys. They're way too fast. They shoot way too hard. I'm glad I got to experience it at this level, but I'm good.
So sort of a segue from that would be like, when you get to that level, and this is really any sport, is how much you're going to make them better is really marginal, because everybody there is so gifted and talented. So it's not as much about bigger, faster, stronger as it would be at the lower levels. But the big piece of it is, and someone in your role, is keeping the talent in the game and keeping them injury free. So the term load management has now become kind of big part of the focus, and it's actually become part of the lexicon of even the most casual sports fan when they see their NBA star sitting in a suit at a game. Can you better define what that means, and starting with kind of defining what internal load is?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, you're 100% right. At this level, that nobody cares if the guy can squat anything. That doesn't matter at all. It's about keeping guys on the ice. Internal load is really a measurement of the internal physiological demand on an action. So, as an example, if the three of us go for a mile run, and we all run it in the exact same amount of time. If we're measuring, usually the way that we would measure internal load is with a heart rate system. So if we all go for a mile run or a race, and we literally, the three of us tie, but I had to work at 95% of my max heart rate, and you guys were at 85 and 75%. My internal load would be much higher. Like, it cost me more to do the same thing. So that's really what internal load is looking at, is what is the body's physiological response to something, to the game, to practice, to training. So it's a way to measure how much, essentially how much work was done. It would be like in a car, it's looking at, the RPMs and gas mileage, right? We could all drive, again, same idea. We could all drive 100 miles. And, depending on the size of the engine and, how fast we were going and all these things, I might get there and be basically on empty, and you guys might be there with half a tank of gas. It cost me more internally to do the same job. So that's kind of, in a nutshell, that's what internal load is talking about. But again, heart rate is the sort of typical sports science tool that we would utilize, but you can use session RPE pretty accurately if you don't have access to those types of tools, where you're essentially just rating a perceived exertion, and then you multiply that by the time, and that'll give you an indicator of internal load as well.
So I'm going to jump in here, Mike, before you get to your next question. Is kind of two parts to follow up on that, Devan. One, do you see anecdotally correlations where the guys who have to continually run at higher RPMs to get the same things done, do they get injured more often? And then kind of the second part of that is then the response to that, most of your training to get them to be more efficient and economical so they can get more done with less effort.
Yeah. So there's sort of two parts to that. All things being equal, if you've got two athletes and it costs one guy more to do the same job, so his internal load is higher, assuming that is basically a fitness issue, then yes, like the less, from a very general perspective, the less fit you are, the harder it is for you to do stuff, the more wear and tear there is over time. So you're more apt to break down or to, get into a bad position and get injured. So yes, lower internal load between two, equal individuals, or, the same individual at different points in time, will be correlated with a lower incidence of injury. That being said, internal load is extremely individual. So I've had plenty of athletes that, we say they run hot, and they have very high internal load metrics. They operate at a very high, percentage of max heart rate, those types of things. And that's just who they are. That's their signature. They're not out of shape. Improving cardiovascular fitness and all of the conditioning work that we would do doesn't necessarily change that. They could be in incredibly good shape to play ice hockey, and that's just how their body operates. So it's not necessary. You can't necessarily compare one guy to the next. You have to compare the same guy to the same guy. All of that being said, yes, basically being in poor shape will have a higher incidence of injury risk. And then there's a second part, but I don't remember that at this point.
So then is most of your focus or at least part of your focus in injury prevention, then improve their economy of not only their conditioning and their aerobic fitness and economy, but also their movement efficiency?
Without question. Yeah. And in all reality, probably more so on the movement efficiency standpoint than the energy system development standpoint, especially at this level. One of the things our guys, whether it's for better or worse, they will skate almost all summer long at this point. It didn't used to be the case. There used to be in ice hockey, a much bigger need for sort of off ice conditioning work. In ice hockey, again, for better or worse, there's pros and cons to it, but most players will be on the ice, maybe not 12 months a year, but for a pretty significant chunk of the off season. So we certainly do program specific energy system work and, periodize that over the course of the off season and assess and monitor that in season. But that stuff mostly takes care of itself. But from a movement efficiency standpoint, that's incredibly important. The more efficient we can help athletes be from a movement technique ability, from a force application standpoint, all of those things, those will go a long way into improving cardiovascular response. If a player can get into better positions and move more effectively and produce force appropriately, the cost of them moving around on the ice will be lower. They'll have to work, less hard, so quote unquote, to get the job done. But it's also going to lead to less wear and tear joints and muscles and things like that. So again, that'll help to reduce the incidence of injury. So that's a big component of what we look at.
So we're going to shift gears a little bit. A big part of sports science is capturing metrics and understanding what to do with those metrics. And these days, I'm sure everybody that you're working with is you're able to capture as much metrics as you really need. But let me ask you this. Have you found that there are some times where giving the feedback or the feedback from the wearables can actually be detrimental to the mindset of the athlete?
Yeah, without question. We have access to a lot of different tools and technologies. We're really fortunate here in Arizona, and our organization is very pro sports science and pro strength and conditioning. So we have access to resources here that are pretty fun to play with when you're in our shoes. But there's no question, like paralysis by analysis can be an issue. So you have to be very careful with what information do you provide to the athlete. We're very transparent. If an athlete wants to see any of the data, it's their data. That's very important to me. But at the same time, you don't want to overwhelm them with things that are not going to be well understood or are going to cause confusion, things like that. And there can be, millions of different metrics that you could potentially look at with all of the different technologies, and that's certainly not helpful. So there's absolutely times when the data is not beneficial or it's not conducive for the athlete to see that. As an example, we do force plate jumping. We use force plates all the time, multiple times a week. The athletes generally enjoy that. They compete. They try to beat each other with how high they get and things like that. I look sort of under the hood at some metrics that help me better understand their response to load, to what their fatigue levels are. Those aren't necessarily things that I share with them up front, because especially during the in-season in the NHL, you play almost every other day. So if metrics are telling me that this player is pretty neurologically fatigued and we have a game tomorrow, that's probably not something that I want to necessarily, depending on the person, share completely with them, but maybe try to guide them to some more, regen and recovery options post-practice, as an example. So it's not necessarily telling them, hey, you look like absolute dog crap today. Like, we got to do something about it. Like, that's going to spook some guys. But using that information on the back end to say, okay, like, we need to make sure that we're, emphasizing A, B, and C from a recovery protocol with Johnny, because, he's clearly pretty fatigued from the last couple games. We need to manage that.
So continuing on that theme, the old expression is the numbers don't lie, but is that always the case when you're looking at the external load? Is it you talked about the internal load and the individuality. Now, is there also the same thing where some guys will actually thrive under more pressure situations or thrive in the big game, so to speak? So engaging how you have to measure that in the balance of how much is enough and how much is too much or too little. How much can we really rely on external load being different from one person to the next?
Yeah, I do agree the numbers don't lie, but they don't provide all the context. So context is really important. From a data analytics, sports science standpoint, we're very cognizant that any of the metrics that we collect and look at, they don't dictate anything we do. They provide information so we can make more informed decisions. And a good example of that is from an external load standpoint, we look at essentially GPS on the ice. It's a slightly different technology, but so we can see, how far does a player skate? How fast do they skate? All these different things on the ice from an external loading standpoint. How much are they doing? Well, just because a player has skated further than they did last game or further than other players on the team, that's not necessarily a good thing. It could be a good thing, or it could mean they're wildly out of position all the time, so they have to skate farther to get back into the play. The number itself doesn't lie. They've skated this far, but why have they skated that far? So understanding the context and asking questions behind what that information is really, really important, because there's lots of instances where, even I talked about force plates earlier, a player's jump height could increase, but their force output or their left to right force asymmetry may be off. So just because they've jumped higher, that doesn't necessarily mean that, things are better. It could be that they're changing their strategy because they're competitive athletes. So they're trying to win the test, but they're changing how they do it. And again, those data points and that story behind the data is really important to understand and have a better feeling of what's actually going on with the athlete.
Now, we're going to circle back later to talking about the integration between skill staff and your performance staff. But when you say how some of these metrics will help drive decision making, you have to obviously do that within the balance of saying how much can we push to make sure that we're ready and that we're have the physical capacity to handle what we need to, but also make sure we look at the long run, that you have a really long season. And we have to look at the long game, not just, hey, could we get through tonight? Yeah, sure we could, but that may end up not helping us 3 months from now. So how do you balance that when you're not the only one making that decision, because you have to make it from a skill and talent perspective as well?
Yeah, absolutely. It's an ever ongoing conversation, right? So part of my role as the high performance director is to connect different stakeholders, the different departments within the organization, bring data into the conversation and create conversation and create dialogue. So I will go up, on an in-season example, like on a daily basis, I will take a look at our load management data, how much we've done, how much do we plan to do, has there been any wrenches thrown into the process with travel or sleep or all of these things. We'll sort of factor all these pieces into what we might consider readiness for the athletes. And then I'll go and have a conversation with the coaching staff on a day-to-day basis and say, hey, this is where we thought we were going to be at this point in the week or in the month. This is where we're at. From a physiological perspective, I recommend that we stay on track, we pull back a little bit, or we're in a window where if you need to hit the gas pedal a little, this is a great opportunity. And then the coaching staff, goes round and round and they say, that's great. Makes sense. I think we'll cut a drill out of practice today. If you're saying that, guys are a little fatigued, or, okay, perfect. This is an opportunity that we can, we need to work on power play a little bit. So if you're telling us, we're in a good place and we can spend some more time, or, they might say that all sounds really good, Devan, go pound sand. We're going to do this today. Okay, no problem. My job is to bring the information forward. Fortunately, we have an unbelievable staff here and group where it's a very collaborative process. They're going to come down into our training facility. They want to know, our head coaches, he wants to know the information. He wants to know where we're at from a data standpoint. He wants to know where we're at from a, my head strength coach is an unbelievable, feel guy. He can really get a feel for the guys when they're in the weight room, what their attitude is, what their mood is like, energy. He's going to come down and want to know, like, how's this guy doing? How does he look? And all of that goes into the pot, right? That's really the essence of a high performance model, is everybody is bringing their domain specific expertise. We throw it into the pot. We have a conversation. A decision is made. We move forward. We analyze. We adjust from there. We do the same thing tomorrow. So that's kind of what the process looks like. But yeah, it's an ongoing process for sure.
So we're going to switch gears just a little bit, and we're going to ask a little bit of a question regarding your book. So one of the benefits of working in pro sports is, most of the time you get a little bit more money to get the goodies, right? You get a budget where you can get the cool tech, and you can really get access to some really innovative stuff. And In the book, you do an awesome job of showing people how to apply those same principles to both like an unlimited budget if you have all this money to spend, or if you just have the basics where you can just do some simple, use some chalk, use some tape, etc. Explain some of the positives and negatives of having the shiny toys versus some of the more basic stuff. Let's talk about that a little bit, because not everybody has access to what you have.
Yeah, the book, the story behind the book was really to try to apply principles to questions. And then what we tried to do with the book was say, okay, if we think that this principle is important, if analyzing explosive power is an important component to what you do in your setting, then here's a bunch of ways that you can do it based on your budget: force plates, jump mat, chalk on the wall, vertical jump height, right? And the reason that we wanted to do that was exactly like you said. Just because we have access to, tools that have, the shiniest tools available, it doesn't necessarily make the process any better. And in some ways it can be detrimental, right? Like I said, we use force plates a lot. The force plates we use probably have 250 different metrics that we could choose from to look at. We look at 3 or 4, you know what I mean? Because there's just no way to look at 250 different things with 23 athletes 3 times a week. It would be impossible. 2, most of those don't matter. A lot of that stuff is just, it can be measured. It doesn't mean that it needs to be measured or should be measured. Not to us, and maybe in a different setting, some specific metric matters. But we look at 2 or 3 things out of that. Now, if you rewind my career 10 years ago, and I'm working at UMass Lowell, and I don't have necessarily the same budget, but I do think that measuring explosive power output via vertical jumping is an important thing to look at with my players, and I can afford a couple of jump mats. How can I build a system with a technology that doesn't provide all of the things that a force plate would, but will still give me information that's usable, that's going to create a conversation? And so that's what the book was kind of about, is okay, the principle is explosive power output and measuring that. Here's a bunch of different ways to do it. More tech is not necessarily better, because it can lead to paralysis by analysis and just a bunch of stuff that doesn't matter. Less tech can be just as useful. The jump mat provided, I would say, 75% of what I get out of our force plates at this point. There's a little more nuance to what we can do now. There's a few more things I can look at. The shiny toy has some benefits, but not a huge difference. So you're able to get the same thing if you think in terms of principles and processes, and not necessarily just the technology itself.
So 2 things that you said there that jump at me and that I really like. One is principles. Mike, write that down. Principles. We should use that word somehow, somewhere.
Hey, wait, isn't that the person that runs the school?
Yeah, I used to get sent there like once a week. And then, but the other thing is system. And so a couple things to that point is, when Mike and I started putting this together, we did a beta version of our course, and we brought in a bunch of people that were colleagues of ours. We did one up by Mike in the Boston area, one by me in New Jersey. We had probably, 15, 20 people who were really experienced coaches, trainers, physical therapists that were colleagues of ours, who I'm going to say minimum experience in the room was 10, 15 years. And when we got to our section on data collection and testing, and we just kind of threw it to the floor and said, who here, like, what is your system? What is your non-negotiables you need to know before you can start with a client or athlete? And we got these blank stares back, and nobody really stood up and said, okay, well, if you walk in the door based on your goals, I always do this, I sometimes do this, and if you have this, then I do this. There was really no rhyme or reason to anything that they were doing. Tell me a little bit about, kind of in your process of coming together with the book, or even in your own experiences, how you see that same thing where people don't necessarily have a process or a system to why they do the testing. Like you said, all the tech is cool, but if you're not going to use that data, and you don't have a system to actually do something with it, then it doesn't really matter. It's really just eyewash.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, for me, the process starts with defining what our key performance indicators are. Like what matters at the end of the day, what physical qualities matter for what we're trying to improve. And in our organization, we sort of start with two main areas. We want to improve basically acceleration and speed. So hockey's obviously an extremely fast sport. It's getting faster all the time. So we've decided as an organization that speed is really important. So we need to understand speed. We need to monitor speed. We need to understand what are the physiological qualities or the components that create speed and acceleration. And then we need to develop systems to monitor those, assess those, and then train for those. And then the other side of the equation is what we call being hockey strong. And that's like being able to, physically out battle somebody in front of the net or in the corner, being able to physically, overpower an opponent. So those are sort of the two big rocks that we start with. And then underneath those, again, we say, okay, well, what is, I'll use speed as the example. What makes a player fast? And so we're able to, use some of our technology. We can use our force plates to understand what their sort of, under the hood, what's their power output, what's their force output, what's their eccentric ability, some of the things we've identified that influence skating speed. And then on the other side, we can do some actual on-ice speed assessment with some technology that we have and look at, in a very specific context, actually sprinting on the ice. What is, again, same things. What are their force output, power output, things like that. So we start with what is the end goal? Trying to make people faster. What are the physical qualities that we believe or within our system have shown us that influence speed? Okay, where does this player fall? So we go through our assessment process. Is this player strong but not explosive? Is this player explosive but not strong? Do they have poor mobility, where mobility ankle mobility may allow them to get into a better position, be more efficient, be able to express force and power in the skating stride better? So we have these decision trees that we work down. And again, that's our system, is we go down these levels and say, can you do this? Are you up to the threshold on force output? Yes or no? If no, okay, then you go into this bucket and we need to look at what's the next level. How else can we assess force? Are you strong on two legs? Are you strong on one leg? Defining what strong is in our setting. And we come all the way down these decision trees and we say, okay, this is where you're at. So within our training program, we have right now a bunch of our prospects are in, and we have one global training program, but we have 3 or 4 different buckets that guys fall into. So everybody may be doing trap bar deadlift if they're, capable of doing that, and biomechanically that's appropriate. But some guys are going to be more on the force end of the spectrum. Some guys are strong, so they need to be more on the power end of the spectrum. So we can, within the team setting, we can adjust what they're doing to be a little bit more pinpoint with them. And then we go back and we reassess every 6 weeks or so. We say, okay, did we actually move the needle? Has our system actually improved the things that we're trying to improve? If yes, okay, same thing. What's the next layer? What do we need to work on at that point? If no, then we need to go back to the drawing board and figure out, well, why did that thing not improve to get to the end game? So for us, systems are really about identifying what your key performance indicators are, and then working backwards and developing a model that attacks the general qualities and then more and more towards the specific qualities that we can influence.
Hey, everybody, a quick break in the action here. Hope you're enjoying the show, and we appreciate you listening. We're working hard to bring you the highest quality content and best guests every single week. So if you could do us a big favor and go and like and subscribe to the show on whatever platform you get your podcasts on, it would be greatly appreciated. Be sure to listen at the end of the show also to find out where you can find out more information about our courses, as well as a special discount code for all our listeners. Thanks again, and let's get back to the show. So as Mike mentioned in the book, you do a really great job of kind of breaking down, okay, well, here's the quality. here's kind of the gold standard for testing it. And then here's, if you don't have that, then you can do this. And then if you really want to go on the really basic low budget side, you could do this. And we lean into your work and refer to it quite a bit in our testing and data collection section of the course. The question I have for you now is in terms of the vetting of when a new test or a new technology makes it into your system. So whether it's you at the highest level or it's the fitness trainer who's saying, does this have value to you? Because we're constantly getting sold, hey, come take this course on this testing system, or hey, buy this VBT unit, or whatever it may be. What would you suggest in terms of the vetting process to say, is this going to have value and make an impact on moving the needle in your profession or as you professionally?
Yeah. I mean, again, to me, it's the process comes back to asking the question, what do you need to improve? Right. So for us in professional hockey, again, we've decided in our organization, speed being a really important component, and not that other things aren't, so it could fall into other buckets. But if a technology company comes to me and says, we have a way to really influence, measure, test, train, upper body, pulling strength. I don't know, I'm making it up. Is that something, layer one to me is like asking the question, like, is that something that matters to us? It might not. In my setting, it probably doesn't. Like, guys are generally strong upper body in ice hockey. You don't have to go down the rabbit hole. It's pretty simple. So layer one would just be ask the question, what do you, in your population, in your group, what do you need to improve? And then look at, okay, if I need to improve X, what is on the market, or does this tool fall into the channel of assessing, measuring, training X? And if not, it's an easy, that might be really cool, might be valid, it might be an unbelievable piece of technology, but it doesn't fit into what I need to. If it fits into that, then it's like the next question to me is, okay, what is this adding or replacing? Right? Velocity-based training. We have GymAware. Okay, there's a lot of different tools on the market. They're not better, worse, whatever. If another velocity-based training tool, comes to me and says, hey, we have this tool, it's unbelievable, it's way better than anything else on the market, I have to then vet it and think to myself, okay, we already have something in this space that is useful for us. Is this new tool better somehow? Does this answer a different question that we're missing? If not, then again, that might be unbelievable, but I'm going to pass. If it does, if there's something that it does that what I currently use doesn't, then, honestly, the next layer is probably, well, how much does it cost? Because as much as even at our level, we have access to, certain levels of budgets, they're not unlimited. And I have to make a case to my GM, my ownership, anytime we want to bring something in. So those are sort of some of the questions that I go through when I think about vetting different tools or technologies or, systems or educational courses, anything like that. What's the question I'm trying to answer? And then does it fit into that? Does it help me answer that question? And if it does, then all the pieces of it, is this logistically feasible? Does it fit into our budget? Does it really move the needle? Is the juice worth the squeeze? Sometimes it's something that would be beneficial, but it's going to take me so much time to learn and then teach my staff and then utilize, and then we'd only really use it with one guy. And sometimes it's just not worth the squeeze that way as well.
And then what about reliability? Not only vetting to make sure that this thing actually tests what we think it's going to test, but also in terms of, I know sometimes the high tech, it doesn't always necessarily mean it's going to be more reliable in terms of the data it gives you versus some of the low tech options. Am I correct in that?
Yeah, no question. More expensive doesn't necessarily mean better. If it's a tool that's in the same space as something we have, then I'm going to, and we get down the road of like really being interested in it, then I'm gonna test it against what we're currently using. So again, I'll use velocity-based training tools. It's just a metric. Like if we're using, we use GymAware. If somebody else comes in and we decide, hey, this is really worth looking at, then we're going to put it up next to GymAware because we've used that long enough that that's valid and reliable for us, and we know where that's at. And it's a gold standard. how does it compare? Like, if it's not pretty damn tight from a reliability standpoint, then it might not be worth changing to a new tool, because even if it does all these other things, in our setting, if that changes the data set and all of a sudden, something that was 1 meter per second is now 1.3 meters per second, well, that can have a big influence on things. And now all of our historical data is really hard to interpret. So reliability is really important, and making sure that we're comparing, apples to apples, and making sure we're on the same page is definitely part of the process.
All right. So I alluded to this before, but sports has become increasingly siloed and specialized, and the elephant in the room with team sports is that the sport coaching staff and their level of buy-in and trust in your program can make or break your level of success. Talk about getting everyone on the same page so no one silo is sabotaging the other. Yeah.
I mean, again, that's a really big part of my role as the performance director, is sort of bringing in all of the different groups. And in the NHL, it's or any professional sport, it's really challenging, because the reality is the organizations are really big. So we have lots of different, departments within hockey operations. We have the coaching staff, we have goaltending coaches, we have development staff, we have skills coaches, we have skating coaches, we have strength coaches, we have athletic trainers, physical therapists, massage therapists, we have travel coordinators, like all of these different people and different roles in the organization, and we all need to be on the same page. So a big part of my job is to kind of sit into the middle of that and be a conduit for conversations, and bringing information to each group, and bringing people together to have those conversations, because there's a wealth of experience and knowledge in all of these different individuals. And the more that we can communicate and collaborate, the more we can learn from each other, push each other further, grow as an organization and as a staff. So, how do we do that? It's informal process. I make sure every room in the facility, I make sure that I touch on, on a daily basis. I'm constantly kind of wandering the halls and making sure I'm communicating with people. From a formal perspective, staff meetings are obviously something that takes place on a daily or weekly basis. A lot of reporting, all of the sports science data is reported out, on a daily basis, and goes to the coaching staff and the general manager and the medical group. And then we utilize Microsoft Teams as our sort of athlete management system. So that's our centralized hub for all of our communication, all of our information, all of our data. It goes into one place, and everybody has access to that. So regardless of where you sit in the organization or what your role is, you have access into this centralized hub where you can pull on data, or you can communicate with somebody else and ask questions and learn from each other.
That's awesome. And I have two parts to follow up with that. One is in terms of getting everybody on the same page in terms of messaging. And for those who are listening, who maybe you're not in a high performance setting or team setting, I even think about, one of the first gyms I worked at, where we had chiropractic care, we had group fitness, we had nutrition, and they all would just basically bash the other departments. And the nutritionists would say, well, don't go to group fitness. Those classes don't do what they say they do. And the group fitness people say, don't go to the personal trainers because they're all meatheads. And the personal trainers say that chiropractor's a quack. And then so the person would end up saying, you know what, you're all idiots, and wouldn't go to anybody. And so getting people on the same page in terms of messaging. So if I'm a player and I'm seeing it's very possible I'm seeing 4, 5, 6 of these individuals over the course of my day, from the people in the training room to the strength staff to the coach staff, that I'm getting the same message throughout the building. Talk a little bit about how everybody's kind of synonymous in terms of what we share and what we don't share, and how that's being shared with the athlete.
Yeah, it starts with having a centralized vision for what we believe in, how we operate, how we communicate. So that's step number one, is making sure that all those different departments, strength and conditioning, medical, nutrition, et cetera, that we start with a shared vision and a shared mission. So that's kind of, I talk about that being our North Star. So regardless of what your individual role is within the organization, that's the North Star. That's what we're trying to do. So when the athlete comes and they see somebody on the medical side, or they come down and they see somebody in the gym, we have a collective and collaborative centralized vision for who we are as a group, what our philosophy is, and what we're trying to do. And then it really is about, it's cliche and it's simple to say, but it's about communication. It's, we meet with our medical staff and our nutritionists and dietitian every single morning just to go over, hey, this is what's coming in. This is what the day's going to look like. These are our injured guys. This is who's taking the lead on that. This is, somebody needs to jump in over here. We need some help in this area, to try to be as smooth and seamless on the surface as possible. Like we joke all the time, like we want to look like a duck swimming across a lake. Like on the top, we are just the athlete sees things are just smooth and calm and pretty, and underneath we are paddling like hell trying to figure shit out and stay ahead of everything. And but we want the athlete to see smooth and steady. And so that's kind of the goal, but it starts with that collective vision. And then it is really just about constant communication. And again, in my role, like I'm the guy that bumps up and down, the gym is on the bottom floor, the training room's on the top floor. The rink is across the street. So I float around and bump around and make sure that everybody's on the same page, field any questions. And then again, we use that centralized platform so that, we can communicate through there and get notes on people and be up to date with what's going on.
And then the second part of that is from, I know from the little bit that I've seen in my experience working in the NFL, it's a little bit of chicken and the egg in terms of you'd really need the people up top to buy in from, GM and especially that head coach to buy in. And it's like, do you get him to buy in so he adapts to what you're trying to do and your message, or do you have to follow them? And the reason why I'm saying that is not only from my experience, but as you're saying all this stuff, I'm like, imagine Devan has all this stuff, all this knowledge, all these tools, all these things available to him. And he gets a head coach who's like watched Miracle too many times. He's got the lights off, blowing the whistle, going again. And he just screwed up 3 months worth of work. Right. So how much do we have to encounter that, whether it's pro level or even down to the lowest levels, competing against the overzealous, we need to make more mentally tough athletes by beating the hell out of them.
Yeah, that's an issue. There's no question. I've been through a couple of head coaches here, both unbelievable coaches, unbelievable people. Fortunate for me, both really bought into what we were doing and on the same page. But anytime you have change, the process can start all over again. I think, when you're dealing with those scenarios, it's important, I guess two things come to mind. One, it's really important for us as practitioners to remember in the team setting and to reiterate this to the coach, especially when you're trying to create trust and buy-in. It's his team. Like if we lose, like he's the first person that's getting fired. So whatever he decides needs to happen, whether I agree with it or not, my job's to voice that, to give him all of the information possible on our end of things and provide my expertise and my opinion. And then when we walk out the door and he's decided not to do it, okay, we're on board. And then I'm going to fight that good fight again the next day. But it's important for him to know that we're here to support him or them, the coaching staff. And, we recognize that it's their team. That helps to create that trust and buy-in so that then, if that is the scenario and then they go out and they smash that guy and you come back the next day and you say, okay, we did that. And now, we've got 3 hip flexor strains and those guys are going to miss practice. And so today, I recommend that this is what the training load, the player load goal is for practice. And then he says, nope, we're going to do it this way. You keep going through that process and hopefully you create some buy-in and some trust. Again, maybe not always. I've been fortunate in my career that I've had great coaches that do that. But it certainly can be, a challenge. And especially when you have more and more practitioners. I know, for Mike, like in the MMA world, like you could have coaches and, trainers and gurus and things all over the place that you just have no influence over what they're doing. And so sometimes the reality is in its triage, and on the back end, we have to adjust on our end and say, well, we were going to have post-game lift today. But guys are banged up this week and we went to overtime and we're really tired. And you know what? We're going to scrap it. We're going to live to fight another day and we're going to move forward. And the process is probably never perfect, but it's just always about that communication, collaboration, and then hopefully being humble enough on our end to know that we are not the show. And if we need to adjust or back off, then that's what we need to do.
So Devan, I'm gonna sort of pick your brain here, and it's gonna have I guess I know where the answer is going to sort of come from, but I still want to ask it anyway because I feel like a lot of people find this pretty interesting. So, you know, you're clearly working with the best hockey players, you know, in the world. You're in the NHL, and there are a lot of young athletes, and also the parents of young athletes that think that the answer to becoming a professional athlete is 24/7 hockey, 12 months out of the year. And the thing that I find very ironic is that, you know, a lot of these kids are just all year round, go, 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 play, play, play. And they think that that is what it's like to, you know, train like a professional athlete. And that's what they think is the path to get there. But the funny thing is, and we all know this, is that when you are training professional athletes, Eric's, you know, worked in the NFL for a decade. You're in NHL. I work with guys in the UFC. Training a professional athlete, when those athletes pay their bills and feed their family with their body, you can't beat the hell out of them. You can't injure them. You can't beat your chest and say, rah, 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 you need to do more. Because if you injure them in the weight room, that's on you. And I think a lot of people don't understand that training like a professional athlete means you do have an off season, which means you do regulate what you are supposed to be regulating, and it's just not all gas pedal. Where do you think this disconnect came from? Like, there's such a huge disconnect from the way that strength and conditioning is sort of started in, you know, middle school, high school, and even college. And then, you know, as we get to pro, it seems like there's a little bit more common sense. But why do you think so many people think that the path is just go, 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 gas pedal down?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know where it comes from, I guess, but it's that idea more is better. And more is not better. Better is better. And in a lot of cases, less is better. You know, we operate on a very minimal effective dose sort of approach. And again, you know, you named it. If a professional hockey player gets hurt in the weight room, A, I'm getting fired right off the bat. B, this is their profession. Like, their job is hockey. It's not how much can you squat. We need to make sure that they can squat enough to improve those KPIs and to keep them as healthy as possible and be robust. But it's not to do as much as we can do. It's so that we can get them on the ice in the season and they can practice every day and perform every day. I think, again, I think you're right. Like, at the highest levels, I think, you know, that's the general approach, because once you're fortunate enough to get to this level, then, you know, hey, if I screw this guy up, you know, I can't really improve, you know, maybe I can't improve this guy that much. He's already the third best player in the entire world, but I could screw him up. So make sure that you don't screw him up. I think at lower levels, I think it's still such a backwards mindset of more is better. And, you know, you guys know, you get a kid at 14, 15 years old, any type of training is going to make that kid better. So it's really easy if that's your worldview as a trainer or as a strength coach, and you're working with, you know, youth athletes at that level, or you know, younger, you know, high school athletes. If you don't have that experience or that perspective of other levels, where it's maybe a lot more challenging to get people better, you know, if you can do anything to a 16-year-old that's never trained, and they're going to get better. They're going to get better faster. So it's like, yeah, another set, another 8 reps, another 100 pounds. Like, that's, oh, they got better. Look at that. And they're going to get better because they're 16 and they got testosterone blowing through their veins and growth hormone coming out the yin yang. And then they're going to get to a point where they're not going to get better with more. And then you're like scratching your head because, well, more was better. So I don't know if that's where that mindset comes from. It's certainly still a challenge in our industry, and in our field in general. I think, you know, sport coaches can be very much the same way. More is not better. Better is better. And it's about understanding or figuring out, you know, to me at least, what's the absolute least that we can do to move the needle. And then you get to that point and you assess, you know, at different times of the year, maybe you're going to do a little more and push a little more, a little less, but very rarely is it just more is better.
I think maybe could some of this come from where we like the hero story of, the Jerry Rice who ran up, that hill for hours and hours and hours. Or we love to hear, these legendary training stories of how this guy left the high school dance so he could run laps, and because he didn't have any friends, and look at him now, he's one of the greatest ever. But they don't understand there's a level of survivorship bias to that there's a lot of kids who left high school dance, ran laps, and then now they're accountants, or they're working, at Best Buy, because there's probably a lot more of those than there are ones that we're seeing a 30 for 30 or a Netflix special about, right?
Oh, that without a doubt, that's a great point. It's like when somebody says, well, I used to be able to, when I was a kid, I didn't have to wear a seatbelt and I could run around in the back of the station wagon and I'm fine. And it's like, yeah, and all the 400 other kids that did that are all dead. Like, you survived. Good job. You lucked out. You're the one. It's the same thing with the athletes. Like that guy that, Jerry Rice was going to be Jerry Rice, whether he did that or not. He was Jerry Rice. Like, he was an absolute freak of nature. And I think that's where, when you look at the top, 0.05% of athletes, and what did they do? A lot of times they were going to be here whether they did the right thing or the wrong thing. And chances are little Johnny is not the top 0.05%. So doing the wrong thing is going to be pretty detrimental.
100%. So before we wrap up, Mike, any closing thoughts on your end?
No, I mean, Devan, I miss seeing your face, man. Next time you come up to the Boston area, we got to make sure we break some bread, and we got to hit up get some of those good IPAs. I don't know how good they are on the West Coast, but I have a feeling they don't compete with the East Coast.
It's tough, man. It's probably better for my liver being here, but it's tough. I don't enjoy them as much.
Yeah, no. But no, man, it's good to see your face. It's been a long time, and yeah, I'm glad you're doing well, man. And thank you for coming on. It's always good to talk shop, and I'd love to have you on again. And it's always good to see your face, and hope you're doing well. But Eric, why don't you close us up, my friend?
Absolutely. So before we wrap things up, so anything new and exciting that you got going, or new projects you're working on?
No, honestly, nothing kind of new in the pipeline. Just chipping away, and what we're doing. They keep me locked away here in the dungeon pretty well at this level, so I don't get out very often. But just chipping away. We have our development camp is coming up with our prospects, and the draft is this week. So kind of focus on those things.
Yeah. Awesome. And then the one takeaway I hope everybody gets when you hear someone like Devan at this level, or in a couple of weeks, we have Eric Cressy coming on, or people who are working at this level, for the guy who's home, like Pete from Yonkers, who wants to call into the sports radio station, say, fire the training staff because their favorite player pulled a hamstring. Realize how much goes in to that person lacing up their skates and playing a game, and how many decisions have to get made, how many different people are involved. And it's not as simple as you think of, hey, they just need to do more of this and they'd all be better. So hopefully that was the take home message, because we didn't even scratch the surface of all that Devan has to probably deal with on a daily basis. But thank you again, man, for coming on. It was absolutely fantastic. And we're going to put some links up to make sure people check out the book as well, because it's definitely great stuff.
I appreciate it, guys. It was a lot of fun. Let's definitely do it again.
Absolutely. Thank you. And thank you for listening. And this has been the Principles of Performance podcast. Thank you for listening to the Principles of Performance podcast. If you've enjoyed our content, please like and share on your social media outlets, as well as subscribe and give us a review on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, or whatever your preferred platform is to listen to. For more information on the Principles of Program Design courses and workshops, visit us at www.principlesofprogramdesign.com and follow us on all of the social media channels where we post new content every day. To save 10% on any PPD courses, enter the discount code PRINCIPLESPODCAST10 at checkout. If you have any questions we can answer or suggestions for the show, you can email us at info@principlesofprogramdesign.com or message us on social media. Thank you again for your support.